How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and this is another episode of my Board Game Versus series. We're going to change it up just a little bit. I'm going to take some feedback I got in the comments and just some things I thought would make this a little bit extra fun. Instead of doing 4 pairings of just sort of games that I thought would pair well together, I'm going to do 3 pairings from now on in these videos, but there's going to be some criteria on the pairs that I select. So one of the pairings is going to be that they have gameplay-specific ties. They play similar or have similar gameplay mechanics. It could be like, having 2 worker placement games or 2 engine builders, things like that, or just something they share in common. Then we're going to do a pairing that is a thematic tie. They could play completely differently, but there's something about the theme that is very, very similar, or it's something in that regard. And then we're going to do one random pairing. We're going to take 2 games that have absolutely nothing in common in my collection, and I'm going to compare them again. All of these, the criteria of all these being that if I had no choice but to get rid of one of these games from my collection and the other one would stay, which one would I get rid of? So this isn't just straight, which is the better game. This is also, I'm looking at this as this is my collection going forward. It's how I introduce games to people. It's the games I have options for game nights. It's the ones that I personally love or want to play more often. So it might not just be, if you watch my videos that were, the games that would never leave my collection, it doesn't necessarily mean that if one of those games pops up here, that it is for sure going to be the one I choose, because that is based off the fact that I don't have these arbitrary rules of you have to choose to get rid of one of these. It was just based on what I would never get rid of in my collection. This is specifically just for fun. If you are someone who wants to pare down your collection, if you're someone who wants to have a tight collection that's smaller but very effective, or if you just want to have something that's entertainment value, if you had to choose between these games, which one would you choose? That's sort of what this video and this series is for. So I've picked 6 games total, 3 pairings that I think are going to be some really interesting ones to discuss, and with some surprising results maybe on some of them. So we're going to just jump right into it. And the first one we're going to do, this is the mechanical ties. So these 2 games have a lot in common in the way they play from a gameplay perspective, and they're 2 smaller games. One is a lot older and one is pretty brand new, and that is going to be me comparing Enchanted Plumes with Lost Cities. So again, we're talking about these 2 games as a comparison on if I was forced right now to get rid of one of these games in my collection, which one would go and which one would stay. So this is a really interesting one because obviously I'm a huge Reiner Knizia fan, and obviously I'm a huge Lost Cities fan. It's ranked really high on my top 50 games of all time. I played a ton of this game, both the physical version, but especially on Board Game Arena. For those who don't know, and not that this is like, I guess this is kind of like a low-key brag now that I think of it, but one of the months when I went really hard into Lost Cities during the pandemic on Board Game Arena, I actually was ranked 2nd overall for the entire month, and I made a push for 1st on the very last day that the ratings were accounted for. I think there's like a 3-month period or something that it accounts for it. I made a huge push to try to get to 1st, and that push dropped me all the way to like 20 something or some number far. But had I just left myself there, I would have finished 2nd. So I play a lot of Lost Cities, and I don't say any of that to say that like I'm an expert on strategy, but just for context, I've definitely obviously played a lot more Lost Cities than I have Enchanted Plumes. So comparing these games is very interesting because if you've heard me talk about Enchanted Plumes before, you know that there is a lot going on in Enchanted Plumes that is very reminiscent of Lost Cities. But there are some key differences, obviously. One being Lost Cities only plays 2 players, whereas Enchanted Plumes will play up to 6 players. And also kind of in all the player ranges I've played Enchanted Plumes, it's been very, very good at multiple player counts so far. It's not like it seems to be like it is a 2-player game, but they just found a way to accommodate it. It tends to be a pretty effective game at all the player counts I've tried it at so far, which obviously I haven't tried it at 6, so I can't vouch for whether that's going to be a good experience with 6 people taking up that much table space around the table creating all their plumes. But basically the difference is here is that in Lost Cities you have the 5 different colors that you're playing cards into, and you're all sort of wondering, you are wondering what your opponent has in their hand, and what are they're holding to potentially block you from playing something, or trying to hold a yellow 8 because they know that you've already played the yellow 7 and you're looking for that card, so they're just taking up a spot in their hand to hold it back. There's a lot of that stuff going on. Some of that is present for sure in Enchanted Plumes, but I would say that aspect of it is a little bit more reeled in because you have more flexibility in what you're able to do in Enchanted Plumes with instead of it being these set colors that you're playing to, you're basically able to create as many plumes as you want. If you want to create a plume and just kind of cap it off and have, a plume that is 3 and then 2 and then 1 card at the end, you can do that. Or if you want to go for this massive plume to score you points, you can do that too. The way that Enchanted Plumes really differentiates itself is that in scoring, the top row of your plume, which can be as long as you want, you can have 3 cards across, you can have 5 cards across, whatever you want to do there, that is all going to score you negative points. So the numbers on the cards come into play in the sense that you want your top row to be as low as possible, but if you do have to put a high number there, you're doing so thinking that the other cards are going to put underneath it are going to make up for that and eventually end up with you having positive points at the end. So you have to kind of keep in mind the cards you're going for and the color of plumes you're going for to have that top row be as low as possible, but also the colors of those plumes on that top row dictate the colors you're allowed to place for the rest of the rows. So if I only place blue and red on the top row, I can only place blue and red on the next row as well. So it makes it really, really interesting that way. It takes the Lost Cities kind of essence and finds a new way to sort of ingest it into a game. So much of it reminded me of Lost Cities when we were playing. I think I said that to Carl like 2 or 3 times, but yet it is very different at the same time. So this is a very interesting comparison because, again, this is me personally, my collection, what would I do? And the fact of the matter is, I have played a ton of Lost Cities, and Lost Cities, I can only really play the physical version with certain people that like Carlo, for instance, like Braden, who like that style of game and like that cutthroatness. A lot of my 2-player games are often, me and Carlo play 2-player games, but I wouldn't say that we're always sitting down to play 2-player only games that are have been in our collection for a long time, like Lost Cities. We're playing a lot of new games. We're playing games that play up to 4, but we're just happening to play it at 2, things like that. So I have to look at it from the grander spectrum of, what is going to get played more often and scratch that itch while also, having me enjoy it as well. And as much as I feel like you guys can tell that I'm doing all this to try to explain myself for the choice I'm about to make, that is for sure going to rattle some people, Carlo probably most of all. But I am actually going to choose to keep Enchanted Plumes and get rid of Lost Cities, which I know it's probably blasphemy to some of you. I'm getting rid of the Knizia game for a brand new game that just came out somewhat recently. But my reasoning here is just the fact that I have way more flexibility with Enchanted Plumes. 2 to 6 players means that in multiple settings with people who don't often play a lot of board games, for instance, or just want to play something a little bit more simple with just, that involves just a deck of cards, but has that strategy element that they can play multiple times and sort of form a meta around it and grow with. Enchanted Plumes has way more flexibility there. Lost Cities, I'm restricted to just 2 players, and that other player has to be very into that kind of style of cutthroat, grueling card game. But not only that, because I've played so much Lost Cities, unless I'm playing with Carlo at this point, I am going to have an unfair advantage no matter what the situation is, to the point where I would almost have to, let's say for instance, I'm going to be going on a date and I decide I'm going to introduce Lost Cities. There's a good chance that because of how much Lost Cities I've played and how much I understand the strategy and the whole the flow of a game of Lost Cities, that I'm probably going to crush that person. Not because I'm amazing at the game, but just because they have not played it. It's the same thing that can come into play with games like Kingdom Builder, for instance, where if I went and sat down with 3 people who had never played Kingdom Builder before, I'm going to be at a huge advantage over them, and that can sometimes be the barrier to entry to a lot of games. You hear that a lot with Root as well. Lost Cities has that for me, and so while there are people I will play it with, Enchanted Plumes is going to get way more plays because I still have a lot to explore with Enchanted Plumes. I don't have this super, huge advantage, and there's multiple people around the table potentially instead of just 2 that I could be playing with. So I'm hoping I justified this well enough to not get too much flack for this. I obviously love Lost Cities, and my choice, which is what's going to happen, is I'm going to keep both. I want these both in my collection. But if I was forced, if someone said you need to get rid of one of these games and you can never have it again in your collection, you have to keep one and get rid of the other. At this point, it just makes more sense for me to keep Enchanted Plumes than it does for me to keep Lost Cities, because I'm going to get more plays out of Enchanted Plumes. And for someone who has this large collection where, a lot of games go unplayed, a game getting more plays is really important to me and into my collection, and just being able to introduce to more people to potentially bring more people into the hobby, which in turn gets me more people to be able to play board games with. It's the cycle of board game life. So Enchanted Plumes is my choice. Let me hear it in the comments. I'm sure you're going to have some thoughts on that, but I stand by it for this fictional, you have to get rid of one game decision that I've made myself make. So That is the first versus. The next one is going to be the thematic versus, and this one is one that was recommended in the comment section of the first video, and I agreed that this would be a really interesting one to discuss because even though these are different games in how they play, the thematic tie to them and the niche they kind of fill in the hobby is very, very similar. So for that, we're talking about Wingspan versus Everdell. So this is the big heavy hitter one in terms of, popularity, I guess we'd say. This isn't necessarily like, not everyone agrees that these are phenomenal board games or even enjoys these games, but I think that everyone would agree that their presence in the board game hobby and, the amount of times they are bringing people into the hobby that maybe normally wouldn't play a board game solidifies them as having a special place in this board game world. And I say that knowing many people who don't often play board games, but when they look at my shelf have said, oh, I've played Wingspan, or oh, I love Everdell, and things like that, which always surprises me, but it's really made me realize that there is something to be said for, I could look at a game and not personally love it, but if it's a game that is regularly bringing people into this hobby, how could I ever really fault it? And how could I not, appreciate that aspect of what it's doing for us to bring more people into board games and make it a more inclusive space and a welcoming space and having more people than just, die-hard enthusiasts in the hobby, for instance. So both of these games, I would say, do that. I've known people that love Wingspan, love Everdell, and don't really play any other board games. They just love the experiences they've had with these two games. And on top of that, they both have similar themes. The animal, inviting, kind of cozy, warm thematics, like Everdell with the woodland creatures and the tree, Wingspan with just like the calmness of the birds and like the bird watching atmosphere and the little eggs and everything. So there's a lot connecting these two games, but they obviously play very different. Wingspan is an engine builder. We're on 3 different, ecosystems. You're essentially creating this engine of cards that is going to always activate its abilities from right to left, whereas Everdell is a worker placement game that also involves this sort of tableau that you're creating with these cards that you're collecting, but a lot of what you're doing is placing workers onto the board to be able to take different actions. So very different styles of games, but the thematic ties are there. So you're probably wondering which of these games I would keep and which one I would get rid of. This was a super, super tough decision, and you might be thinking, well, Dylan, you just said you would never get rid of Wingspan, and that's correct. I did say I would never get rid of Wingspan in that video, but I didn't say that thinking I would also have to get rid of Everdell if I kept Wingspan. So both of these games right now stay in my collection, so much because I, one, enjoy playing them. Like, I should just preface that. I do enjoy both these games a lot, but 2, I can always introduce new people into the hobby with these games and have a good time at the same time. And they kind of spawn people wanting to play. Like if I introduce Wingspan to them, then they want to play Everdell and vice versa. Like it's sort of this snowball effect with them. So I had to ask myself and weigh 2 different things. Which one do I enjoy playing more? And which one do I think is going to be more effective in bringing people into the hobby and getting to the table more often? And the tough thing about that is that I think I enjoy Everdell ever so slightly more than I enjoy Wingspan. And if not, they're both very close. It's probably one of those things that changes day by day, which I like more. But I would probably have more success, I think, introducing people to the hobby or getting it to the table with Wingspan than I would with Everdell. And even that, I would say, is very, very close. So there was so much to consider, even just table presence. I think the table presence of Everdell is nicer. I think that there's expansions for both these games, so both can expand if I ever wanted to like really go heavy into just one because the other one didn't exist. Everdell has more interesting expansions that I would personally like to explore with like Spirecrest and Pearlbrook that I think I would like to get one day, whereas Wingspan has expansions I'm interested to explore, but they're not high on my list to get. There's enough for me to see still in Wingspan with the cards that are in there that I don't necessarily need more cards at this exact point in time. So lots to weigh. Both kind of, I waffled back and forth on this. I feel like even whatever decision I announce right now might change, tomorrow for all I know. But I am going to give the ever slight win to Wingspan. This was, like I said, very tough. I could find reasons, I've named reasons for both here, but ultimately I think that I do enjoy Wingspan just a little bit more, and maybe even what put it over the top is that every single time I play, those damn little eggs remind me of Cadbury mini eggs and make me super hungry, and then I end up going and buying some Cadbury mini eggs, and then I end up gorging on Cadbury mini eggs, which sounds like I'm really mad about that, but future Dylan is mad about me eating so many mini eggs, but present Dylan, who's eating those mini eggs, is having a hell of a good time. So that's an extra little added bonus. But on top of that, like I said, I really enjoy playing Wingspan. I haven't played it enough to exhaust everything out of the cards that I've seen, and it is just slightly more successful in my experience on a game that other people will ask to play or want to play, and even want to play multiple times. They play it once, and now every time they're coming over, for instance, it's like, hey, do you want to throw down a game of Wingspan? They don't necessarily want to play it a random board game specifically. They specifically want to play Wingspan, and so much of that is just they love the setup of it, they love the way it looks, they feel relaxed when playing it. Everdell has that as well. It just ever so slightly doesn't have quite the same appeal that Wingspan seems to have in my collection. Because I enjoy them both so much, I'm giving the slight nod to Wingspan, so I am going, I guess, with the grain of my game that would never leave my collection, but it was very close. I honestly came into this video thinking I might have given the nod to Everdell and I'd have to explain why I just did a video where I said I'd never get rid of Wingspan and then announce immediately if I had to get rid of one, I'd get rid of Wingspan. But nevertheless, that is my choice. Both good options. If you were put into the exact same position, if you had both and you were forced to get rid of one, let me know which one you'd get rid of. I'm very curious if you have a different way, a different criteria to look at than the criteria I used. Maybe you're not often introducing games to new people and it's just which one would gravitate more to your group. Very curious to hear it. That is my choice though. All right, and the very last one for today, the third one, this is the very random choosing. So with these, I think in the future, I'm actually gonna be running polls on Patreon for people to choose 2 random games from my collection, and then I'll have to pit them against each other with this criteria. For this first one, I just picked 2 games that could not be less alike in terms of thematics and even in gameplay mechanics. So much different, just for the fun of it. If I had to get rid of one and I had to keep one, what I would choose. So what I've gone with is an interesting one that is going to be Cat Lady versus Terraforming Mars. So you might be thinking, depending on where you land on this side of the debate, this is a ridiculous choice to make, and why would you ever choose Cat Lady over Terraforming Mars? Maybe if you play it on Cat Lady, you think vice versa. But again, this isn't just which is the better game. That's not the point of this versus series. We do versus videos, and we'll continue to do versus videos, where it's just a single versus, like I've done with Castle of Burgundy and Castle of Tuscany, and like we have some other ones coming up. I've done the crew versions, and those are which one we think is the better game. This is, if I was forced to get rid of one from my collection and keep one, which would I choose? And I base that off a lot of criteria, and it's not just what I enjoy, it's also what's gonna get played the most, and what other games I have in my collection that if I had to get rid of one are gonna fill the niche that one was filling. So for instance, if I choose to get rid of Cat Lady, do I have other games that play similar to Cat Lady that will make up for the fact that I no longer have in my collection? That might sway my decision as well. So Terraforming Mars is obviously a very popular game. It's in the top 5, I believe, in Board Game Geek's top 100 rankings. Talked about a lot. Has had numerous expansions. I only own one of those, which is Prelude, and it's a very, very different game than Cat Lady. You have this board in the center that you're sort of having a bit of an area control thing going on with. You're placing tiles that you're then putting your colored cubes onto to claim different spaces. You have a ton of cards in this game that you're having to pay for and play to be able to do a variety of different effects, some that are targeting your opponents directly, some that are creating extra actions that you're then able to do on future turns, some that are getting you animals or other resources that are represented by cubes. I can't remember what the other one is. It's like not amoeba, microbes or something like that. There's animals and something else. I haven't played in a while, so I'm trying to remember. But the amount of those that you collect are going to score you different points, or that they can sort of like snowball into each other. Like when you do something here, it's going to add an animal to this card. So you're doing that as well. There's so much even extra stuff being manipulated on the board with having to change the oxygen level, change the planet temperature, create oceans. All of those are going to give you points when you do them. So you want to be the first one to do those things. There's a lot going on. This is like a 2+ hour game usually. Every time I've played it, that has a lot to consider and is not going to be for everyone. That's the one strike against Terraforming Mars right off the bat, is that I play games with a variety of gamers. I play games with people who this is the exact type of game they want to play all the time, and I enjoy them as well. Me and Carlo are omni gamers. We play everything from Cat Lady to Terraforming Mars and enjoy them all. But I will also be introducing games to people that are all over the spectrum. So I have people that I am often introducing Cat Lady to, and I will say right off the bat, I have played Cat Lady way more times than I have played Terraforming Mars. Obviously, that's probably not too much of a surprise because of the length that the game takes to play, but also just the people that I'm introducing games to often or having over, this is just happening to hit the table more than Terraforming Mars. That being said, when Terraforming Mars hits the table, I would say that my enjoyment level of a game of Terraforming Mars is worth probably, 2 to 3 games of Cat Lady. It's not that I don't enjoy this. I love Cat Lady, but I really do enjoy Terraforming Mars a little bit more than I do, or a decent amount more than I do Cat Lady. So the idea is, or the thought process here is, if I had to get rid of one, all these things that I'm weighing is not only which one do I enjoy more, which is Terraforming Mars, not only that, but also, which one's hitting the table more often, and who am I introducing games to? There's a lot to consider in this really random pairing. And ultimately, as much as I would love to not have to get rid of Terraforming Mars, I'm actually going to give the nod to Cat Lady ever so slightly and get rid of Terraforming Mars. And honestly, some people are going to give me tons of flack for this, and even more flack than getting rid of Lost Cities. But again, the criteria here is not which one is the better game. If that was the case, I'd be giving the nod to Terraforming Mars in this case, because I think it's a better game than Cat Lady, even though they're both great. But I had to weigh how much these games are getting played, and again, who I'm going to be able to bring into the hobby with a new game like this. And even more so than that, the tipping factor for me was when I'm going to sit down to play a big game, a big invested experience like Terraforming Mars. Take Cat Lady out of the equation, how much am I choosing Terraforming Mars out of other games in my collection over Zolkin, over Teotihuacan, over Hallertau, or Noosefjord, or Feast for Odin, or, in Bitoku, like all these games that I have that take a lot of time, a lot of setup, are a dedicated game, sort of the main event of a game night. Like we're talking right now of a filler game versus a main event in many ways. Out of all the main events I have, I'm not choosing Terraforming Mars very often, and even beyond that, people that are coming over and choosing games aren't choosing Terraforming Mars in my collection as the one that they want to play. So I could keep Terraforming Mars and get rid of this, and the fact of the matter is I'd be losing out on game sessions by getting rid of this more than I would by getting rid of this. And I think that sort of was the tipping point. It says, for me, it was, if I'm going to have a game night, which one am I going to miss more in the collection by not having it as an option to offer people? And I weighed that more than which one I enjoy personally playing, because Terraforming Mars is also popular enough that I'm sure I can find some local all-you-can-board fans in Winnipeg, or some, as I start attending board games meetups and things like that locally, and as the pandemic, starts to wind down, those are opening up a little bit more. I can probably find a copy of Terraforming Mars that someone's offering up, not to buy, but like offering up to play and to invite people in to play, more so than probably I can find Cat Lady, and nor would I be seeking out a game of Cat Lady in that same way. So that was ultimately my decision. I know I'll get some flack for this. I know people are going to come into the comments somewhere and probably say, I came in here looking for verses and I left here in a fury because someone just said they're keeping Cat Lady and getting rid of Terraforming Mars. But you know what? That is my reasoning. I think some people might understand it. And if you don't, just please know I am not saying Terraforming Mars is a bad game. In fact, I think it's a better game than Cat Lady, but it's not the only thing I weighed on that. So that is my random pairing and my random pick, which means that my choices for these 3 pairings were Wingspan, Cat Lady, and Enchanted. Plumes, and the ones that would have to leave my collection but aren't actually leaving my collection. Who was I blocking this from? I always do this, and I'm thinking, like, am I stopping Desmond from understanding what I'm saying? And the games I'm getting rid of are Terraforming Mars, Lost Cities, and Everdell, which are 3 heavy hitter games that I'm sure someone's going to give me a lot of flack for. So that is the versus this time. I hope it was fun, this little format. Always looking for feedback in the comments for what you like, what you don't like. If you have other ideas, my thought process going forward as I do these videos, it'll always be, one thematic comparison, one gameplay comparison, and one random comparison. I think that that's a fun way to do it. But if you have other ideas of cool pairings that aren't of those, let me know, because maybe I can switch one of those and say this week or this month we're not doing a gameplay pairing, we're doing this pairing. Things that would be useful to you that you actually want to decide in your collection what to do with, or ones that you just think that would be super fun to hear Dylan talk about. If you want to, hear me make the case for 2 of my favorite games, then that's the reason they're paired. Let me have it. I would love to put myself through that grueling process. So hope you enjoyed the video. I realized I have my coffee here. I don't even think I took a sip the whole time. It's probably cold right now, but I do like cold coffee, so that's not too bad. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments. If you have feedback, let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell a friend. We love all the support, and thank you so much for it. On top of that, if you haven't seen yet, we are running a 24-hour charity live stream on May 28th. All proceeds going to Sariel, an amazing mental health organization here locally that we are super pumped to support. We have 30+ prize packages that all you have to do to be entered in to win any of them is donating $5. $5 will get you an entry into every single draw. You can only win a max of one, but we're gonna draw the best ones, or the, not the best ones first, but the ones that have most value in terms of price point first when you do the draws. You always have the chance of those big ones first. And you can win all of them. If you want more entries, every $5 additional is gonna get you an additional entry into every prize package. And there are some amazing, amazing prize packages. Head over to our website, go to allyoucanboard.com. You can see everything that's been currently announced. More being added all the time. Me and Carlo are having our own personal prize packages on there that'll be updated soon. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.